you have not added your information to the chat, feel free to do that. And you can put your contact information, the best ways to get in touch with you. Just to let you know, we are starting a series of leadership where every single month we will be hosted by another fellow entrepreneur and leader in business. And this month, I am proud and honored to bring Anna Etten to the stage as our co-host and guest host to talk a little bit about ERPs and what she does and the contribution that she makes to businesses and how she can help our organizations. So, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And
Hello,
ladies, we
hello.
are filled completely through the rest of the year, but if you want to get on the calendar for 2027 and host one of these events, please reach out to me. And Anna, yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. No, I was going to tell you to keep talking because let's see if I can share my screen the way that I want to while
Okay.
we're yeah, definitely get your contact info in there and I will get mine as well. All right, let's see. How savvy can Anna be? All right. Well, maybe not as much as I want to be, but let's jump in here. Um, well, I'm super excited to be here with everyone. Definitely see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. So very excited to meet everyone. I love taking connections offline after these calls, and so please don't hesitate to reach out. And especially if you're new to Global Chamber, like just reach out and grab 30 minutes on somebody's calendar. Everybody that I have met in this organization is so willing and so eager to share knowledge and to make connection. So, you don't have to wait if you see somebody you want to connect with. So, um, I have been involved with employee resource groups in some way or another for almost 20 years. And so let's do a quick just I don't know if we can do we have tools like raise hand. I was just gonna look for some kind of reaction for folks. How many people on the call are familiar with employee resource groups? Have you participated in one or aware of them at all? Okay. Cool. Raise hand, reaction, smile, some kind of thing like that. Okay. Cool, cool. So we've got some familiarity with ERGs, which is great, but I love the chance to introduce these amazing groups as well. So um again, my name is Anna Etten. I am the co-owner of Tapestry Partner Solutions. We are an advisory firm that is broadly focused on workforce dynamics, particularly around the generational transitions and the need for knowledge transfer from our tenured employees and capture that great organizational knowledge as many industries are seeing boomers exit and losing some critical knowledge on that end and in welcoming and onboarding our amazing Gen Z employees and teammates into the workforce, and the pull through from the implications and pull through of those generational dynamics, not just from a uh, um, getting along together perspective, right? It's not just about, you often hear about generational training from a focus of let's all get along together, but this is really about the implications to your workforce much more broadly. And so within that, one of the things that we also have in our purview is the Global ERG Network. And it's an 18-year-old organization that I was partnered with in my corporate roles for many years and now have the opportunity to lead. We partner with organizations that are interested in building strong and sustainable employee-led groups, and we'll talk about the names of what those may be called in different organizations. Um, and so we're also going to get into why these are important and why people care about them these days. Maybe some that didn't before. So just wanted to check that you're only seeing PowerPoint and not all the stuff happening behind it. Any thumbs up for me on that? Okay. I'm one of those people that has 100 windows open. So just wanted to, make sure you're not getting all of that madness behind it. So we're going to talk about, as I said, what are ERGs? Why do people care? How do they operate? And particularly why you don't necessarily have to be a large organization to have ERGs. You don't have to be a Fortune 100. And then what Jen does. Definitely welcome questions. We will have plenty of time for discussion. This is not Anna's on a platform talking for an hour. We definitely want your ideas, want your questions, want your commentary. So, let's start with the basics. What is an employee resource group? At their foundation, they are groups of employees that come together around a shared identity, a shared experience or interests and who are doing that on a volunteer basis. These are folks who are not paid to do this work. So they could be a salesperson. I was a call center manager when I launched my first ERG chapter in 2007. So these are folks from any and every business line, and companies use a lot of different names for what these groups may be. The goal is don't get hung up on the name. It's more about the context. I will say 20 years ago, there was this thought that groups started as affinity groups and then they became employee resource groups. And then the most sophisticated versions of them were called business resource groups, with the notion that that was the goal for integration of the employee and the group working together or the company working together. I will say that I see lots of very well integrated, incredibly powerful and impactful business type work happening from groups of all names. So I built the employee group program office at Amazon for 6 years. And we took it from 100 chapters to 2,500 chapters globally, and with the nomenclature of affinity groups. So don't get stuck in the names, particularly in this time. Um, let's a little bit about what they are and what they are not. So they're definitely volunteer led, but there's an expectation that they are doing something strategic, that they are contributing in some way that is meaningful to things that the organization cares about. And we'll talk about what that might look like. They are also your culture carriers. These are the amount of intelligence, and I don't mean sort of human intellect, but employee insights and intelligence that builds in these groups. When you have a bunch of smart people coming into a room together on a regular basis, building a community, talking about these shared topics and interests, they see things before you might see them. They see what's trending in the conversations. They see what might be concerning and, from an employee relations perspective. They have ideas that are being generated that, I call it the ERG collision theory. For me as a younger manager and I had all these ideas and all this energy and stuff that I wanted to contribute to the business that was far beyond my day job. I was a call center manager. My job was to make sure customer calls were answered in a timely manner, our metrics were on point, our employees did their job. But my brain was on fire with so many other cool things that I wanted to do for the company that I worked for. And so for me, and it's not, I will say everybody comes to ERGs for something different. Some people want community. Some people are looking for a safe space for people that are experiencing things like me. So many organizations, for instance, have families and caregivers groups. That allows people as they are transitioning through different experiences in their lives. Maybe you're not a caregiver today, but you become one all of a sudden through any number of circumstances. And there's this community, this employee resource group of other people that have experienced the same thing. And you get in a room with them and your ideas start going because you have this shared experience, a shared connection. So the power of innovation, like I think you could feel the energy because for me, again, this was the launching ground for me into leadership, into the career that I've built 20 years later, because I found a place where my ideas were valued, they were needed, they were wanted, and I could get some traction. So These groups are increasingly measured against business goals. But we'll talk about the nuance in that. And these are your most highly engaged employees. After doing this work at Bank of America and Amazon, I have definitely answered the hardest questions I could possibly ask to some of the most senior executives. And now working in my own organization, I get to be a little snarkier about it. And say, like, these are literally your employees that are raising their hands to do more for your company. There are people that want to be more engaged. They are asking for leadership roles. They are asking for opportunities. Why would you not pour your leadership development investments into these people? Why would you not do that? So what they are not is often fully in control of their own activities, right? Your organization has a structure, and ERGs are expected to operate within the company structure. The code of ethics that your organization has, the facilities policies, the IP policies, all of those things are absolutely still expected for ERGs. All of the employee codes that they signed when they, came in are expected in their ERGs, plus an understanding of their role as leaders in the company, in the community of influence. They may not be in formal leadership roles. Many people who lead in ERGs are not managers in their day jobs. They don't have a title that provides them organizational power or authority in their formal roles. But this becomes one, a place that they can demonstrate their leadership through influence, but also a leadership development pipeline. So, and I use myself as an example, but I've coached hundreds of people in the last 2 decades around this. For me, as a call center manager, I was not responsible for managing any money. I didn't have a budget. I didn't even have a corporate card at that point in my career. And I had no sort of fiscal responsibility to the company besides my own proper behavior. And so, as an ERG leader, I was given a small budget that I was responsible for managing, where that I used to create events. I brought my teammates together to do different activities. And that gave me a chance to show this other skill that I literally just couldn't have shown in my day job because it wasn't part of my list of responsibilities. So that showed that I had other skills, other things to demonstrate. So it's really this amazing sort of um, place for fueling for, again, that collision theory of people learning things and demonstrating skills. It also, ERGs can contribute to company goals. They are not responsible and accountable. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the RACI model. I don't know if is that an old school concept now? Is that I don't know. It's from a generational perspective. Is RACI like old school? But from an ERG perspective, employee-led groups can contribute in incredibly meaningful ways, but they are not responsible for whether you hit your hiring targets, for instance. So you might have ERG leaders. So if I am a talent acquisition leader and I want to deepen our relationships in the Latino community, going to our Hispanic Latino ERG is the smartest thing for me to do. But that team shouldn't be a tool for us. That's lazy recruiting, and the group will see right through it. Going to the group, for instance, and asking, how can we make a more authentic connection with your community? And how can we show that the experiences of being a Latino employee at our organization is positive, that you have found good career development here, that you would recommend the company to your friends and family. How do we do a better job of that? And if there's authentic listening and then that is incorporated in the strategy, ERG members will show up all day long to help you recruit people. If they are having uniquely good experiences in their jobs, if it's good for me to work here, then sure, I want to tell other people. And if you value my input, then yeah, let's do it. So the power of what you can do with these groups is huge. So, why a lot of companies care now. We in Gen, we work with two big cohorts of organizations right now. There are many companies that have been doing ERG work for 30 years. 40 years. They've been doing this for a long time. And so they are doing things like incorporating new groups. They are figuring out better, more efficient ways to have succession planning for their group so that when one leader leaves, they don't lose traction on what they had built the last few years. We also have this cohort of, I call them the 2020 cohort. They are organizations that began to recognize the power of ERGs after George Floyd was murdered in the United States in 2020. And there was a bit of a racial reckoning that began in the country. And from people working in inclusion work, diversity work, equity work, there was a strong push to say we need to do more faster right now. And the companies that recognize that were often doing that through launching ERGs and recognizing the power of providing those community connections and recognizing the identity and experiences of employees in a more authentic way. So now, whether they've been doing this for, a couple of years or, a couple of decades, what most organizations are um, thinking about, the leading organizations that we see. So our Jen has an annual awards process that recognizes leading companies with ERGs and councils. We're 18 years into the awards. More than 500 awards have been given out over the 18-year span, and we'll hand out another 25 or 30 in November at our conference. And so what we see in leading organizations that they are thinking about retention. They're thinking about innovation, leadership development, culture and belonging, community impact. And I've talked about a couple of these things already. You cannot underestimate the connection and the power of connection. There is a loneliness epidemic in the world that is recognized by world leaders, by the World Health Organization, by scientists. It is desperate and critical in human health. And so finding ways for humans to build authentic and meaningful connections that go beyond the transaction is more important than it ever was. It's not just about keeping someone at my company. Although, for the leaders that are not into the human part of it, who just want, the business side, who, your CFOs, whoever wants the bottom line, is it's expensive to hire and retrain people, right? That's a lot of money spent. And you don't want to have to keep doing that. In frontline workers right now, I recently read a stat that there's a 99% turnover rate in front. Like that is nuts, right? That's absolutely nuts. The cost to retrain and recruit and retrain. So it is a line item to consider. The leadership development, again, it is your most effective and efficient and lowest cost leadership development opportunity. They are employees that want to connect and do things with each other. They are doing resume writing workshops and all kinds of learning opportunities and just really cool things in sharing skills and building knowledge. In many organizations we're working with, ERGs are leading AI adoption. They are both, taking on the technology in their own groups to figure out how to work smarter, not harder. What kinds of things need the human touch and what kinds of things can be done a little bit by machine. If I'm a volunteer leader and I am responsible for, a $5 million sales portfolio and 47 clients, and I'm doing my ERG work between my client meetings, I gotta be like, how can I make this easier? How can I make this faster? So many of these folks are leading the AI adoption in their organizations. They're also teaching their colleagues. I saw this at Amazon when we rolled out Slack as a platform. We already had an internal IM platform, and so this was kind of a layered on. And I raised my hand as the program manager to jump into the rollout team because I knew the ERGs would want in on that. And that if they were early adopters, that they would also then in their day jobs help their teams be early adopters and then fast forward the rollout across the organization. So there are some incredible things that, I mean, again, because ERGs stretch across your business line, There are people that come from every business unit, every geography, if you build them right, um, every layer of the company. Talk about rollouts and adoption. Like if you need a benefits if you have a benefit that is underutilized, share it with your ERGs and they will roll it out immediately because they are all about getting resources to their members. So the culture and belonging thing we could spend an entire day talking about, but ultimately when people feel seen and valued and appreciated, they can do their best work. And I'll give you the sort of cliff note gut punch that I used to share when I did a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion training. And I would ask our leaders to think about the first time that they felt excluded, the first moment that they were uninvited. For a lot of us, that might be on the playground as a child. It might be a birthday party that you weren't invited to, or a cousin or a neighbor that did, went somewhere that you didn't get invited to. And then you take that feeling in your chest or in your throat or in your gut or wherever you sort of feel it physically. And now take that feeling with you and try to go into work today and do your best work. Probably doesn't work very well. It does not feel good. And that's what many people feel in the workplace when they are unseen, when they are excluded, when they are undervalued, when they are marginalized in their contributions. And so ERGs can create that seenness, that visibility individually and collectively that people really need. The community impact is massive, and I'm so excited. One of our annual awards is focused around community impact, and the stories that we see in the applications are just massive. In most of the organizations that we work with, ERGs are leading the contributions and volunteer hours. So, like the actual number of like when you need a bunch of people to go wear your company t-shirts and go to Habitat for Humanity or go help build schools or do whatever, give out food, the amazing number of community investment projects that happen across your organizations. The companies that have ERGs, the ERGs are driving 60 to 80% of the volunteerism in those orgs. And so, it's just people want to give back. What makes this really hard, and I don't think any of these things will really surprise you. They are not necessarily unique to employee resource groups, but because these are volunteer groups, it makes it explicitly difficult. So they're a volunteer. They're squeezing this in between their day job. And one of the things that Jen does as a partner, we have a platform with a bunch of downloadable templates, tools, recordings, resources, things like that. And I kind of tell people I listen to everything on 2x speed. And I tell our collab members, I'm like, just go in, even it doesn't hurt my feelings if you listen to me on 2x. Like just wherever you can squeeze it in, it's there when you need it. It's on demand. They have very little time, and they're often not recognized for the work that they're doing. There is pressure to show some kind of impact. So at Amazon, we built our ERGs on spreadsheets. And I was expected to create fancy reports for our C-suite for the impact that we were sharing. And I'm like, okay. Right. So there is this pressure to show. There are lots of ways to do it, and I'm being a little catty at the moment, but there are ways to measure impact. But it does require some investment for the company to help the volunteers. Like if I can't get to the data that I need because I don't have any tools or resources, like how do I get you the numbers? So, there is the leadership turnover, fragile succession. I mean, look, they're completely dependent upon the volunteerism of employees. And so, if somebody gets a new job, if life gets, life be lifing, as I say, and something happens, child gets sick, you win the lottery, who knows what happens? You get a promotion, like things happen, and people come with very good intentions raise their hands to lead something, and it just doesn't work the way they wanted it to. And so there's a lot of turnover. This is, people are not paid for this. And so particularly if they are not recognized, I mean, most people that do this volunteer work just need a pat on the head and a thank you every now and then. And a gift card wouldn't hurt, but people don't really, that's not really what they're in it for, right? They're in it for the work and for the impact and the output and the outcomes for communities and for their teammates. But it is real work, and it's work. And then the complexities, again, that is an entire other conversation and session for us to talk about, globally, the varying political, social climates that organizations are dealing with. There is a perception, I will be very pointed in sharing something. There historically, employee resource groups were connected to and emerged from the work that was called DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. They were groups that sat within or underneath an umbrella of DEI work. That's not wrong. However, our organization has really shifted the way that we talk about it, and because the leaders that understand that work inherently as people work don't need the DEI language. And right now that gets in the way for many organizations. Even using that terminology, particularly in the United States, is challenging. What leaders need to understand, if they're not doing it already, what they need to see is the other stuff that I just talked to you about, right? The retention, the leadership development, the community impacts, that's what they need to hear about. This is workforce development. I got a Gen Z daughter, and granted, she's had me in her ear her whole life, but when she went looking for jobs, she was looking for companies that had ERGs. And it doesn't, she knows it doesn't mean she's going to get a great job, but she knows that that is a signal for her that the culture at that organization values people in some meaningful way and will recognize her as a person, not just as another number. So, quick shot on how they actually operate. So, every ERG has some kind of layers, and the number of layers and complexity will depend on the organization. So, again, this is just kind of a quick shot of what it might look like. So there are some kind of ERG chairs, leaders, the people that are doing the day to day. Sometimes they're called presidents, depending on, I've heard directors. Again, this is where you don't get hung up in the nomenclature. Whatever works at your company. Excuse me. I've been in financial services, in HR, and technology, and the word director has completely different meanings in all those spaces. So do what you will, right? It's more about fitting it, and there's no one size fits all with ERGs. It is all about what works with your organizational terminology and culture. So, some kind of executive sponsor. The ERGs are most effective when these executive sponsors are at C-suite level, because they get an insight and into the room in a way that you just can't open doors in other ways. However, when you are at an organization that's as large as a Bank of America and Amazon, where I was, there's also value in having a slightly more junior executive sponsor that may be a VP versus an SVP, or someone who's a little bit more accessible day to day, that your C-suite sponsors in a giant organization, your Fortune 500s, are probably not going to be able to drop in to a monthly meeting, maybe quarterly, and ideally you're talking with them regularly if you're an ERG leader. But having somebody that's more of an advisor, that's your real strategy and advisor, that helps you move things, can also be valuable. So some organizations have also a layer of advisor in nomenclature. The leadership team, sometimes it's called a board, sometimes it's called a committee. Those are the other folks that are leading more of the functional things. So it's likely an event or programming chair, the person that's running the activities. Sometimes there's a membership chair, someone who's thinking about welcoming in new members and trying to encourage employees to sign up. You'll definitely need a communications chair. You gotta, send some messages, send some emails, write some newsletters, however your organization communicates. A finance chair is almost always recognized, even if you only have $100. You don't have to have a lot of money to start ERGs. People just want to get connected. That's really what they want, is to find each other. And then there are the members. Depending on your organization, you may also have it could be an HR team, it could be an inclusion team or a DEI program office. The folks that essentially administer or and govern the running of the employee resource group. I have various feelings on where this should sit, and that's another whole conversation. But um it's wherever an organization can launch it. More now than ever, we see often our um, people that used to maybe called chief diversity officers are now inclusion and belonging leaders. They often have employee experience or employee retention remit in their purview, sometimes also leadership development. So they're often cross-functional HR leaders that are responsible for, running the ERGs. And then you've got to have your business leaders involved. You've got to have some other folks that are bought into where these ERGs are going. And whether that is through their personal experience, because they have a vested interest, they themselves may be members of the community. Maybe I am a parent and a caregiver, and so I want to be a champion for the caregivers group. That is also important to note that your sponsors and business champions do not have to be from the community. Some of the most powerful experiences I have seen were from, for instance, a senior white male executive as a sponsor for a Latinos group. And because of his tenure and his willingness to be curious and a lifelong learner and take guidance from the group, they would send him recommendations and say, hey, go follow these folks on, they didn't need to do the labor of teaching him. They'd just say, go read these books, go follow these people on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever, and go learn about our community. And he did the work. And then he was able to guide them in some incredibly powerful moves. Um, Quick note on inclusion councils. So you may also hear sometimes they're called business councils, inclusion councils, diversity councils. Again, the nomenclature. Some have ERGs and councils. Some only have councils. Some only have ERGs. So councils are typically a bit more formal in structure. So while your ERGs are often volunteer led, I can raise my hand. And at least in some organizations, I can even raise my hand and walk right into a chairperson role somewhere. Maybe there is an election, maybe a selection process, but councils more so are either selected by business leaders or nominated by business leaders that want someone to represent their interests and have a leadership development opportunity through this. So sometimes they're selected in partnership with HR. Certainly in large organizations that have very formal HR and leadership development pipeline processes, there may be top talent that's identified for a leadership position and they come in through ERGs. So they may be more formal. Quick note on how they reach global communities, and this is kind of building from the earlier value and benefit. ERGs really can take your brand outside the company walls in a way that your marketing team can't. In an authentic way that is reflecting their experiences as working at the company, that doesn't just happen from marketing campaigns. And so you can, I talked about rollouts. There is a spread of information, of knowledge, of leading practices share that happens across cultures. It also helps just connect your companies across regions when you build ERGs that are connecting employees. As you enter new markets, we've seen, particularly at Amazon, as we saw, entry into new markets in the Middle East and Africa, there were some moments where our ERGs were just critical and some of the insights that they brought into how we should approach those market entries. We've talked about communities from a talent perspective. This is it's a signal, as I said, to new talent coming in about what your company values. And you could also, why pay for a focus group? You've got employees in your own company that can tell you exactly what's going on in their community. So that is, internal insights that are right there available to you. Quick note, I'm going to fast forward through this how because I've talked a little bit about it along the way, how we partner with organizations. We are long-term strategic partners for companies that want to build strong, sustainable ERGs that are last beyond a single leader. We have an ERG health check that can assess if you've got a program. We can assess what's happening today. If you don't, we can help assess the climate. We build out long-term roadmaps as well. And as I've mentioned, we've got, self-service resources. The Impact Awards are annual. We will have our celebration at conference in November. We encourage you, if your organization has ERGs or if you have clients with ERGs, the awards start again. Applications will open next March for 2027. And I mean, I have to say it's a privilege to give out the awards and see the gratitude that these organizations have for just being seen in that sort of powerful way. So huge extension, personal invitation from me to all Global Chamber members to join us in Charlotte, North Carolina. For me, that is close to home, which I'm really excited about. But our annual conference this year, it's where we celebrate those folks that I mentioned. But it's also where we convene about 150 folks that are a mix of practitioners. So they are the HR leaders and executives that run these organizations. They are the executive sponsors that support the orgs, and they are ERG leaders that are the volunteers doing the work and coming together, deep diving into how this actually works. And so we will send this to you in email as well, so you have this. But I would love to meet some folks in person in Charlotte. Um, and last but not least is follow us on LinkedIn. That's where all the info is coming out, awards. We also have a new fellowship program we're announcing next week for nonprofits. So if you have any nonprofit partners, we want to make sure that in organizations where cost is a barrier, that we can provide some no-cost registrations for a small group of fellows in this program. So super excited. I'm always happy to chat, brainstorm. I've built this at a couple of the biggest organizations in the world. And if I'm happy to brainstorm. It's my favorite thing. So, feel free to call us to chat about this. And then there's our LinkedIn for folks that want to follow. That's probably the easiest way. And I have been talking so much that I didn't put my own info in the link. But I'm going to stop talking now, and I know we've got a little bit of time left before the top of our call. Would love to hear from y'all, whether that is your personal experiences with ERGs, how this resonates with you. If you've got an idea about it, a question, if you want to know some tea, I probably got some stories. But would love to hear what your thoughts are about employee resource groups.
I have a question for you, actually. First of all, thank you, because that was a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate it and a lot of good information there. I'm curious, do you ever find that there's a certain timing for that would be optimal to bring in an ERG into a large organization? For example, I was thinking as you were talking, um, certainly somebody who's been in the HR realm for over 20 some odd years, I'm thinking to myself, how glorious that the employees are getting a voice in this very organized way. And I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful. But I do think about also, all of these things that are happening in the climate today with, the mass layoffs and that's not, let's face it, that's not anything new. It's got a different cape on now. It's AI, right? So,
Yeah.
but we've seen mass layoffs before, and I'm not minimizing them because they're terrible, but I'm just saying, like, do you ever find that there's a
Mhm.
timing where an organization like this would be most optimal in bringing that in or introducing it?
Yes and no. So and I'll clarify that. So thank you for the question, Laura, and really appreciate it. So I would say there are definitely some bad times to bring in ERGs. But the catch is, right, even in organizations that are going through massive change, if it's done authentically and carefully, I still think the ERG can be a bridge and a retention, um, I don't want to say retention play because that sounds icky to me, but can be a connector that keeps your employees that wanted to stay anyway engaged in a time in which people are highly disengaged. So we hear my experience was, and I hear this consistently across organizations is people are staying because of their ERG connections. I mean, they are, it is a contributing factor to, oh, my manager might not like me right now, but gosh, I don't feel it like changing my whole life and my whole, like, I kind of wanted to keep working here. I'll just get through it. I've got an ERG community. The Black Employee Network is great. I can still stay connected, or my women's group's amazing. I can still stay connected. My veterans group's so powerful. I can stay connected and find a new job through my ERG. So I would say even in the tough times, it can be beneficial. But I have seen a lot of organizations that ran too far too fast and tried to start like all the ERGs at one time, and I would definitely not recommend that. I think some very careful listening to your current employee sentiment through whatever vehicles that is, whether that's survey, employee listening, focus groups, and that's part of what we can do for orgs that don't yet have ERGs is assess the climate. We're working with a large healthcare organization that was going through some mergers and acquisition activities and really wanted to get this going. They had started a veterans ERG, it kind of fell apart. They were trying to figure out what to do next. And we were able to get in and said, yeah, you need to like hold on this for about 6 months, right? With the organizational change folks are going through, there's not going to be appetite. People are just hanging on. They're just getting their jobs done right now. So I know that's it's a little bit of both but what I do recommend is that employee listening. When so in from 2021 to 2023, we grew our chapter footprint 900% at Amazon. And I would have people calling me every couple of days. I get an email, a message, Slack message, or a call from somebody that say, "I'm so and so, and I'm responsible for the launching the affinity groups in the distribution site in Missouri, XYZ, Missouri." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "We want to launch all 13 groups." I'm like, "Oh, yikes! Please don't do that." Right? Please don't launch all 13 groups right away. Please, let's pause and we would really, particularly in some of those operations locations, would say I would give them really low hang like order a pack of 100 stickers of every ERG and put them in the break room. And whichever pack of stickers disappears the fastest, that's the ERG you need to start first. Right? Like to keep it simple. You do not have to over orchestrate it in a place where you don't have the demand data, right? Sometimes you have the demand data, and some organizations have have an appetite to say, throw out a survey and say, we would like to launch some employee resource groups. Which one do you want first? But that's way too open for many organizations, right? So, no, that's an awesome question. I could talk to you all day about that one, but let me jump in and get Tiffany as well.
Oh, and I think you and I could also go on and on for days about this. So in my work, it's really interesting. We are seeing something completely different, and I'm so curious about this. So the ERGs that we are seeing here in Canada, especially in our large organizations, are starting to utilize our marginalized groups for free labor. So now our
Mhm.
marginalized populations are now under further stress, further burnout,
Yep.
further, kind of backpedaling within these organizations. And because they've got their regular job, and now their ERG work is being tied to their performance in ways that is absolutely, it is unacceptable and
Yeah.
it's free. So up here, we're actually really working on advocating in the space of inclusion councils so
Yep.
that we've got more formal structure, more formal leaders sitting at the table. Because if the formal leaders have to do free work alongside our marginalized, kind of populations, then all of a sudden that amount of free work starts to level out a little bit, and they see where it's putting too much pressure. as well, we're starting to advocate for ERG should not be free labor, especially when we talk about the leadership positions. If we have people that are formally leading and it is on their performance reviews to lead and to organize ERGs with measurable metrics attached to that, that should be a paid position. And I mean, I'm not saying it has to be paid at, 75, $150,000 a year. However, it does need to be paid because we have organizations right now that are taking advantage of these groups. And it is heartbreaking because, like, I heard all
Yeah.
of your excitement and your stories, and I'm like, that is where they come from. And then they are
Yep.
dismantled at the core because organizations take advantage. So I'm just really curious, like, what are you seeing down there? Like, what's your experiences?
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, and then you and I need to get on a call for like an hour because I mean, and I can give them a roadmap to help fix this. I have not seen this, right? I mean, huh. And the conversation about should ERGs be compensated or should they not be? Should ERG leaders is a hot one. I'm going to give you my hot take is I believe that there should be recognition and reward. I do not believe there should be monetary compensation because if you should be paying somebody to do the work, that is a paid position at your company, right? So if someone has to do so much work that we are considering whether they should be paid for it because their contribution is so critical and without it we lose something invaluable that we cannot replace if they're filling a gap for instance in leadership development in your talent acquisition if
Mhm.
they are closing the gap in your recruitment
Absolutely.
activities
Yeah. Yeah.
like all of those things like those are jobs that somebody should be paid to do and your company needs to be taken. And so ERGs often bring ideas to the table that are not being addressed properly. I mean, so in some ways, that is part of their job to function to say, you know what, there's an issue over here, right? Like, be a little bit of the squeaky wheel to say there's something leader X that I think you guys are missing back here. Like, there's a problem. Um, but when that happens, they can be part of the influence back to that racing model. They should be consulted, they should be informed, they can influence, they are not responsible or accountable for fixing that. And so you could I will soapbox for those folks all day long, but I also have the roadmap to fix it. There is a way to help fix that. So I would love, let's get in the weeds together and figure out, maybe there's some work for us to do together in this path because, yeah, no, I got big feelings about that. And one of the ways I'll just very quickly for those of you that are also interested, and then I think I saw Marissa as well, um, is to create, for instance, some of the labor that ERGs are asked to do is teaching other people about what it feels like to be me. So the case in point is after 2020, many companies went to their Black employee resource groups to ask to have listening sessions, to have round tables, to ask them for guidance, to have them put on events. And it wasn't inherently the wrong thing to do, except if that's the first time you've cared, it's not a great look. And it is, if it doesn't extend into action, it is a problem and it is also exhaustive emotional labor. So I'm a community leader who's raised my hand to support my fellow employees. I am a member of the community and so I'm experiencing my own personal trauma. I have my family and my outside work and I'm trying to be resilient for my kids or whatever my community is experiencing and my ERG community that I'm trying to be a leader for. And also, now I got to go tell all these other people outside my community how hard it is to live my life. Like, that's what you expect of me. And that's the position that a lot of ERG leaders are put in. It's the same thing with the disability community, right? Tell us how hard it is to be disabled. How hard is it to be you? How hard is it to be a woman? And so some of the labor that needs to be replaced are making sure that the company is providing your executive sponsors, your company leaders, your ERG members with learning resources that are not reliant upon the individual ERG leaders, There are a gazillion brilliant Black creators, writers, musicians, poets, authors. Go read that. Stop expecting your ERG members to explain life, right? And so some of the labor that is done, it is like actual labor of like I'm running an event in addition to my day job. I'm managing a spreadsheet. I'm doing something important in addition to my day job. But some of it, that emotional labor weighs incredibly heavy and it is not defined, right? It is difficult to put a finger on exactly the weight of how that feels for people in any community. Yeah, Marissa, please, please, I would love to hear from you, friend. It's good to see you.
Thank you, thank you. Good morning. I'm sorry I didn't make it to join the room, but I've been listening and I want a fantastic presentation as usual. And Tiffany, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a putting the skunk on the table, as we say when we talk about ERGs and diversity. There's always that side, right? Like, why do employees have to organize us volunteers to bring about important issues? And then and Anna, you mentioned that in your presentation there are nuances to that, right? So thank you for elaborating. I am curious about because part of my question was exactly what Tiffany was bringing on, but the other question I have is more about remote versus hybrid, and how did that impact, because of course organizations have to be large enough, right, to have ERGs, to at least one ERG, right? And those are the ones that, and tech, right? So those are the ones that went 100% remote at first, right? And
Yeah.
stayed. Many of them, I do know many of them that are still very remote because they have staffers around the world. So they're not truly bringing them to the US or main offices in the UK. How has that, and whether they were able to bring them back to the office or not, that's another conversation. But how has that
Yeah,
impacted
right.
ERG work, or how does ERG work is impacted by this post-pandemic reality?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And so many organizations. So we work with healthcare and manufacturing and logistics and tech and what that distribution looks like is a little different in every org. I mean, in healthcare, it is people in 10 different hospitals that are working with patients. Whereas, in logistics, it is people driving vehicles. And so, remote and distributed can look and feel very different. And the overarching answer is if it's not intentional, it's not going to happen. And we have to reach those employees where they are. It's in many of the orgs that we work with, it's a 70% remote workforce or distributed and remote in some way. So it's factories, it's plants, it's locations, stores, retail stores. And so the fastest answer is reaching employees where they already are. At Amazon, we reach 2,500 factory locations, store locations by using the app that people were already using. So there's an app that they use on their cell phones to log various hours and do other um, daily functions. Instead of, those employees aren't going to a computer every day. They're not sitting on meetings, and lunch and learns are not viable. But we can get something on the app. That's where we started, was building something, reaching people where they are. And many of our and many of our uh, manufacturing partners, it is adding something to the daily huddle and or the weekly huddle for ERGs. There are safety briefings every day. Once a week, you get 5 minutes for something related to ERGs, and then you meet up in the break rooms. So, the I would say those are trickier than fully remote. Like fully remote with people that are able to log in from a computer at a desk is actually way easier. And like I started running chat, like my first virtual chapter I launched in 2009 was fully virtual.
Okay.
That's way less complicated, right? Than if you've got
Hmm.
people like
Yeah,
physically out.
hybrid. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Yes.
absolutely. I love it. So Pele, I know we have pushed us to the top of the hour, but what an awesome conversation. I love the questions. I love the engagement. Like I let's connect if y'all want to talk further. We can talk about specific. Oh, aren't you? You're such a sweetheart. Thank you for getting that. I can't do two things at once like that. I just can't. Yeah, talk and type does not work well for me. So please do connect. I know Tiffany and I are gonna we're gonna solve the Canada situation, right? We're gonna tackle that one, but
I love
no,
it.
really
I love it.
appreciate the time today and always with this great global chamber group.
Yes, Anna, it's always such a pleasure. I learn so much, and every time you speak, I have this thing inside of me. It's just like passion and it's just bubbling, and I just get excited about working and helping people. So I love working with you, Anna. And Anna and I, we met in Global Chamber, and we are off to the races, and we're trying to solve the world's issues.
We got
So
some big stuff in the works. Stay
yes, we
tuned.
do. Yes, we do. And so thank you so much, Anna, for joining us and for sharing. If you want to talk to Anna, I did drop her LinkedIn in the comments. Please reach out to her. She's an amazing person to know. So much insight. She can help you grow and scale. I promise
Thank you,
you.
my friend.
And so excited. Next month, August 26th, we will be having our special guest host, Laura Fredrickson. So thank you, Laura. We're excited to hear all about your company and the work that you're doing. And guys, like I said, we've got some more openings. If you want to host and talk about what you do, then please join us and reach out to me. And guys, if you have reached out to me and found me ex unavailable, I just relocated from Mexico to the US, and that has taken a toll. But I promise that I'm still here, and I will be reaching out very soon. So, thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your month, and I'll see you back in August.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.